Hello lovely people, how are you all doing today? I really hope you are well. I'm continuing from the video that you will have seen a couple of days ago when I was cooking and chatting about shopping. I've now got 2 more pots on the stove with a completely different meal on the go, bubbling away. So I thought, great, this is my opportunity to now sit and chat to you in a little bit more detail about those books I was mentioning. We might get onto other stuff too. We'll see how time goes. So the first one I wanted to talk about is this book, I Contain Multitudes by Ed Young. This was a gift from Nikki. Thank you so much, Nikki, and I hope you enjoyed a guilt-free Diwali. Oh my goodness, right, subtitle, before I get carried away. The Microbes Within Us and a Grander View of Life. This book is about bugs. So I think for shorthand, I'm going to call them bugs. I'm talking about bacteria, viruses, fungi that are both in us, on us, all around us, on every surface in our home, in animals, on them, in the sea. They are everywhere. Which we kind of all know, don't we? But oh my goodness, this book was a bit mind-blowing, if I'm honest. It's fantastic. I could not put it down. Let me just grab my notes. I remember some time ago, I think it was at the beginning of the year when I was talking about, it was also from Nikki. She sent me the book, I think it's called The Secret Life of Trees by Peter Woolben. I haven't got the copy anymore, I gave it to a friend. I'm just going to look up the title though in my little record of books. Sorry, The Hidden Life of Trees. The Hidden Life of Trees by Peter Woolben. When I read that, I'm pretty sure it's in that video, I remember saying that, you know, we get all these natural history programs on telly, don't we? Blue Planet, or, you know, life in the tropics, life in the Arctic, life in the oceans. And I was saying at the time, wouldn't it be amazing to have a whole series, or at least one program that's life in the soil, because it's a whole universe of life in the soil itself. Yeah, so I'd kind of wished for that, and then along comes this book, and it's kind of, that's what it is. This entire microscopic world that, I mean, it is mind-blowing. It's also mind-boggling. The reason I say it's mind-boggling is it's incredibly information dense, but because the information is so fascinating and engrossing, it's an easy read. Like I said, I could hardly put it down. I was chomping my way through all this information. It's a total page turner. Mind-blowing because, yes, I think while we all have some idea that bugs, microbes, but some idea that these bugs are all around us, how much do we really stop and think about that? How much do we actually really know? The answer is, as I read this, and there's me, an infectious diseases nurse, I kind of thought, I don't know anything. Now I do. There's a lot. So I was just mentioning soil. So this doesn't tackle soil or plants at all. This is all fauna. So this is about animals, human beings and other animals. And there's a lot of focus on... Okay, it's such a huge subject, where to start? So I think most of us are aware that there are probably millions of bugs out there. And I think generally our attitude is we must kill them. You know, we see adverts all the time, don't we, for cleaning products. It kills 99.9% of all known germs. We've been brought up on and fed this fodder from media that germs are bad. You don't want to catch germs. You don't want germs on the surface. Destroy it, destroy it, destroy it. The fact is, as I now know, I mean, I kind of had an inkling anyway, but now know, is that there are so many bugs that are not harmful. I think she mentioned at one point, out of thousands of bacteria, thousands of different bacteria, there are only 100 which are known to harm us. Now, look, yes, when they harm us, they can really harm us, they can kill us. But this idea that, you know, that all these bugs are bad and that we must eradicate bugs from our home, we must keep spraying and sanitizing, is actually really bad for us. Stop. We need our bugs, because in fact, if this is our kind of a scale of bugs, we've got a few at this end which are really bad for us, we've got a few at this end which are actually really good for us, and then there's a whole host in the middle which seem to be pretty benign, but they may be working with these guys to help them do their good work, and it may be that some of them might be aiding, it might be that they aid the baddies. So yeah, this idea that, you know, all germs are bad and we must get rid of them. But then of course, it's kind of referring to it in that shopping, cooking / making my new way of shopping. There are so many that are really good for us, and the effect they have on our gut, and having them in our gut, and therefore the ripples, the ramifications on our health are huge. There's a whole bit in there about the gut-brain axis, which is being talked about a bit more these days. Excuse me. This idea of a healthy gut and therefore a healthy brain, or a gut that's out of whack, leading to depression, anxiety. I mean, it's staggering to think that what's going on in our gut can affect our brain so dramatically. As I was reading it, the further on I was reading it, I was thinking, I am no longer eating for me. I am now eating for my gut. What does my gut need? What do I need to feed it? And that's why, you know, when we talk about a healthy diet being a varied diet, this notion of 5 veg a day, it's kind of been blown out of the water. Make it more like 10 different veg a day. And over the course of a week, to try to include 30 different vegetables in our diets. Now, a lot of that is about the different nutrients that different veg provide, but also those different veg on different gut microbes, the different gut microbes needing different things. I can hardly talk about it. I mean, I can't do this justice in 5 minutes. I can hardly talk about it because it's so massive. The research that's now being done, research on microbes is, it has been ongoing for decades, even in some cases centuries. But in recent years, there's been there's been so much more research. In the last sort of 50, 60 years, so much more research. And as more research is done and as more understanding happens, we start to see implications, uses for, if we know that this particular microbiome in our gut helps us in such and such a way, is it possible to transplant that microbe into our gut, for example? The implications for medicine are huge. There were so many times I was reading it, my jaw was dropping open. What? I mean, if that's possible, that's amazing. Early days. But, you know, it could be that in 100 years' time, forget medicine as we know it, it's all going to be about microbes and putting microbes in our guts. I can't recommend this book highly enough. I'm struggling to speak about it because it's incredibly complex. It's incredibly huge as a subject matter, utterly engrossing and fascinating. Learning about how, you know, one particular animal can eat leaves that we know are coated with cyanide, for example. Was it cyanide? but they have a microbe in their gut. So there's a lot in the book about symbiosis as well, about how, you know, we might have a particular microbe in our gut and it really likes living there because we feed it what it wants, and in return, although it's not, you know, we've not sat down and drawn up an agreement and signed it, but in return, that microbe for us makes a certain nutrient more available, or it's helping our immune system. There's a huge amount in the book about our gut flora and how important it is in terms of our immune system. It's endless, and the importance of these microscopic creatures all around us and in us, it's just infinitesimal and huge. So I think, what did I write? Trying to remember. I just keep writing words like mind-blowing, mind-boggling. The idea as well that when we reach for a certain food, it might be because that microorganism is telling us to, in a way. It wants us to feed it a certain thing. About the assumption of microbes being bad. I like it. I'm lost for words. I'm rarely like this. You know, I'm rarely like this. But all I can say is if you can find a copy. I mean, I'm just going to look to see which pages I marked and why I marked them. That's about the aggressive warfare on microbes. And that's the thing, that there are so many beneficial microbes both around us and in us, that if we indiscriminately wage war on 99.99% of all known germs, we could well be destroying those which we are living symbiotically with. They're actually good for us. Just open a window, let some fresh air in. Oh yeah, and this idea. So I was just saying about how, you know, the microbe is controlling me. So if I reach for yet another piece of chocolate, I haven't had any chocolate for a long time. Am I being controlled by the microbe to do it? And you might think that sounds ridiculously far-fetched, but think about, for example, and it's noted here, the rabies virus, what that does to dogs and how it controls them, but also, and I'm sure women in particular, those who've been pregnant and owned a cat will know about this one. The I think it's called toxoplasmosis for humans, isn't it? It's a brain parasite called Toxoplasma gondii. It's a puppet master. It can only, this virus can only reproduce in a cat. So if the virus gets into a rat, it will suppress the rodent's natural fear of the cat and replace it. So instead of the rat feeling scared of the cat, the rat will feel sexual attraction towards the cat and go to the cat. So then the cat will kill the rat, eat it, and the virus gets into the cat, and that's where the virus can reproduce in the cat. I mean, it's mind-blowing to think that this bug, this microbe, gets into a rat and it changes the rat's brain and therefore the rat's behaviour. Mind-boggling, mind-blowing. Read this book. Oh yeah, I just marked this page with one of the scientists saying we are becoming a nation of tubbed, scrubbed, deodorised neurotics. Let's not be scared of bugs. You know, we need to have a healthy respect of some bugs. You know, we don't want to get E. coli out of control so that it makes us, you know, have an upset stomach. It goes like, you know what I'm talking about. We don't want to expose ourselves to COVID or flu in particular. But, you know, look at, you know, after we'd all locked down for a year, then in the following year, everybody seemed to have a cold. Yeah, because our immunity had been suppressed because we weren't being exposed to that wonderful world of bugs out there. We want exposure because getting them in us, not the dangerous ones, but getting them in us, they help to boost our immune system. What have I written here? Oh, marked here. I've marked so many. I might have to reread the whole book. Yeah, sorry, I'm gonna get lost in it. I do think I might have to reread the whole book. What's great for those of you who are like-minded like this, so that much is the book. That a huge, vast section at the end is all the citations. So wherever, you know, whenever she's quoting from a paper, a science paper, a periodical, whatever, it's all here. So if you want to do further reading, if you can get your hands on any of these papers, Google them. You might need an academic account, an Athens account, but it's all there, so you can do a ton of further research. Then there's an extensive bibliography at the end, so if you want to do some more reading, brilliant. When I was, once I'd qualified as a nurse and I'd started working, and I was working, the ward I was working on, yes, we were doing bone marrow transplants, so we had some kids with leukemia, but a lot of the kids I worked with were kids who were born without an immune system. They were totally lacking an immune system, so we had to transplant one in. So obviously infection control on that ward was paramount. I also used to look after kids with infectious diseases. On the same ward, I could have a patient in one room with open TB, coming out their lungs, and a patient in the next room with zero immunity. That TB would kill that child. How can I possibly nurse those two patients? Through infection control measures, through being clean. I don't know where I was going with that. Yeah, so I just lost my train. I'm back at work suddenly. Oh yes, in terms of reading, because I was talking about the bibliography. What's really fascinating is, as my own further study, I was reading a lot on bacteriology, virology, a lot of my own reading, science medical textbooks. And I guess most of them would have been written, I would probably only read texts written within the last sort of 10, 15 years or so. But they were all, because it's the medical model, they were all focused on the bad stuff, beating the bad stuff. So what was a delight for me as an ex-pro in that world kind of was reading this. There was so much positive stuff, you know. There are some really, really good guys out there in the bug world. So yeah, read it. Read it and weep. It was brilliant. Right, changing subject completely. This is going to be a real quickie with this one. I have just reread Taka the Otter. I found this in a box on someone's front wall in the summer. There was a box with a label, help yourself. Looked through the box, it was mostly crime thrillers, not me. A couple of kids' book and this. And I love this because you see, it's the puffin. It's the same edition I read when I was a kid. I probably read it when I was about 10 or 11. So when I saw it, I thought, oh yeah, I think I've forgotten it. Let's have a reread. I can't believe I read it when I was 10 or 11. It's brutal. It's beautiful and it's brutal. It's beautiful in that, so it's written about 100 years ago. I think it was 1927. And it gives us a wonderful picture of a countryside which, and we're coming to that in the next book, which has kind of almost been lost. But there are a handful of people around the country who are trying to bring it back. It's all from an otter's eye view, but it's full of trees and flowers and birds and insects. It's gorgeous descriptions of the wildlife. And yes, some of those things that we are on the verge of losing. It's beautiful. But my God, it's brutal because of the hunting. So also at the start, we start off with Taka being born. And it's just a delight, the scenes of watching him and his two sister cubs frolicking in the water, playing with their mum, learning how to catch their fish. It's utterly, utterly gorgeous. The hunt, though, and the humans in general, the traps, there are some pretty grisly, horrific scenes in this of animals having a leg trapped in in steel jaws. I was thinking as I was reading it, gosh, do kids still read this? I can imagine it being sanitized for kids now, because it's horrific in places. I cried. There was more than one occasion reading it when I cried. And I'm going to get emotional now. I remember those feelings as a kid of thinking, I hate humans. Humans are horrible. Stop it. Why are we so cruel to nature? And I had all those feelings come whooshing back to me when I was reading this. The humans are horrible. It's a beautiful book that I think everyone should read. But gird yourself, because it's the brutality, the last three, they get hunted throughout the book, but the last 3 chapters are this one hunt that goes on for hours and hours. It goes on over 10 hours. And it's exhausting to read it, never mind how exhausted the Otter would have been. And it's all based on his observations, and he rewrote it, trying to make sure everything was as accurate and true to nature as possible. Wonderful book. No wonder it stood the test of time. Wonderful, but my God, you need a strong stomach and a box of hankies to read it. Now, keeping an eye on the time, I realised I went on about microbes a bit too long. I was just trying to find the right words. So then I have read Wilding by Isabella Tree. The subtitle is The Return of Nature to a British Farm. Now, it's a little bit of a misnomer, because in many ways they've turned their back on agriculture to wild their property, and it's a huge property. It's they're landed gentry. They live in a fancy house and acres, I think 3,500 acres. It sort of pretty much starts in the year 2000. They have been struggling with, it's an Arab, I think they're a mix from arable and dairy. I'm struggling to remember because it's just at the beginning, but they're struggling to make any money as farmers, and they obviously lean this way anyway. So around about 2000 they make the decision to turn their back on farming and to see what grants they can get, see what help they can get to let the land go back to nature, give the land breathing space with as little intervention from them as possible. So the very first chapter it's quite hard. It's another hard one to stomach, because it charts all our losses in the last few years. It charts how much bird populations have declined, our various wildflowers, butterflies, insects, it basically charts the shrinking of our biodiversity specifically in farmland. So, to cut a long story short, it's a really good read. They want to try a system of managing the land with as little human input as possible. So, for example, in terms of looking after the soil, they have grazing animals. They're doing a couple of things. They're keeping scrub and tree growth from taking over too much, chomp it down. They are fertilizing the soil with their dung. Even things like how their hooves, depending on what animal they use, how their hooves work on the ground to churn the ground up to release long since dormant wildflower seeds, for example. So they they want to introduce species which are as close to our ancient species. So they have a longhorn cattle species. They introduce Exmoor ponies because they're the closest to, I can't remember what ancient wild horse was called. But they wanted species which would look after themselves. Just no interventions from the humans. So they don't need intervention for carving or foaling. They don't need intervention in terms of antibiotics and worming. They don't need intervention in terms of supplementary feeding. They just be out foraging, and foraging all sorts, not just eating grass, but trees, flowers, berries, everything. And then later on they have a couple of pigs. Again, that's to do with how pigs forage and work the land. And they basically create a system which pretty much looks after itself. There's a little section in there about the river, because they've got 1.5 miles of river running through their land. It's in Sussex. I think it's the River Arun. And it's been canalised, as in it's been put into a straight culvert with steep sides, straight through. So they let that, that's a bit they do have to manage, but they re-wiggle it and they take away those steep sides. It's gently sloping sides, and that's all about flood management. That's really fascinating. They want to get beavers, but this book was written in 2016, so they're at the point where they're hoping that at some point they can have beavers. The joy of this book is and as a reader, it's almost like we can see and hear and smell all of that life coming back. It's a place called NEP. Some of you might have heard. What's the official name of it? NEP Biodiversity Project, NEP Wild Project, NEP, KNEPP. Over the years, they gather more and more sort of specialists to help them, so soil specialists, oak tree, ancient oaks, hedgerows. The hedgerows burst forth and are huge once again. So they get quite a fantastic little team of people who, everyone's getting really invested in this project, not invested in terms of financially, but investing in terms of their wisdom and their advice that they can share, so that then it starts to be a biologist's paradise. We want to come here and study. Students doing their masters, their PhD, can we come to NEP and look at, people have these incredible specialities where they're only interested in one type of moth. Of all the moths, they just study one moth. So we get the kind of insight and wisdom of these specialists too, which then as a reader, that's deepening our knowledge and appreciation of that one tiny species. It's wonderful what they've done. And in terms of sustainability, because that might be the question, the big question in my head right the way through is, and this is something that John Lewis Stemple talks about, James Rebanks, the shepherd, it's how can we produce enough food for us all to eat, but still keep our biodiversity or bring it back? How can we produce enough food without wiping out and scrubbing up? Thousands of miles of hedgerows have disappeared. Scrub out all the hedgerows so we can get these vast, huge, £1 million combines into the fields. That's why, if there's a tree in the field, chop it down. If there's hedgerows, chop them down, get rid of it all so we can have this monocrop grown. It's terrifying. There's one point in it where one of the experts was saying, if we carry on as we are, the soil only has about 100 harvests left. Artificial fertiliser won't keep working. We need to look after that soil. But yes, I've gone off subject again, haven't I? It's a subject that's passionate to me. Yes, back to that food production thing. How can we have food production without all these, these artificial fertilisers which are wrecking the soil? They're running off into the water. They're wrecking our rivers, and they keep having to be applied year after year because they don't stay in the soil, and they're costing farmers a fortune. Farmers are spending so much on chemicals. They can hardly make a penny when they take their product to market. So is there a way that we can farm where the farmer can actually earn some decent money for his or her produce, they're not laying out on all these chemicals, but also with the animals. So they have intervened a couple of times when, in terms of euthanizing, you know, they're not just going to leave an animal in agony, dying in agony. So there is a tiny bit of intervention in that way. And I think, was there a foaling or carving they did? I can't remember now. Anyway, but what happened with their land, these beautiful, I'm going to find you the picture, these beautiful longhorns. Now, obviously I'm vegetarian, I wish everyone was, but we're not, and I accept that. Look at the longhorn. Just look, it's having a whale of a time in there's just so much diversity in its diet there. So their cattle, they don't have antibiotics, they are hardy animals, so they don't need bringing in the winter and feeding on grain. Why are we feeding animals grain? That's not their diet. So eventually they start, when the herd gets too big and they need to cull, rather than it going to waste, they sell that meat. So they are actually sort of still farming. They are still producing food. This is my dream for the future. I wish it could happen everywhere, or at least in half the country. Yeah. I'm going to get emotional again. This is my dream. This is my dream for our planet, for our country and our planet. And then you can see how that, oh, we really need to go now. You can see how that sort of goes back to what I was saying in the kitchen in the previous video about supporting our small mixed farms, supporting our organic farmers, getting away from this mass-produced cheap food, but which is just wrecking our countryside. It's not even countryside anymore, but it's wrecking our ecology, both here and, you know, in other places around the world. So yeah, if we can afford it, those of us who can afford it, let's do everything we can to support those small farms who are trying to increase biodiversity, who are trying to look after the soil for generations to come in 300, 400, 500 years' time. So yeah, some proper thought-provoking books. Taka, just unbearably sad. Oh, sorry, did I say it's Henry Williamson? For those who don't know it, Henry Williamson. Illustrations by, is it C.F. Tunnicliffe, who, yeah, a copious illustrator with around sort of nature and natural history. Lovely stuff. But these two, both in their own different ways, utterly thought-provoking. This one, I mean, my brain is still fried. That's why I think I need to read it again. This one, it's a little flag of hope that's been raised up a flagpole, and I hope more and more of us can see that flag fluttering in the breeze and have hope and encourage each other to make some changes. And yeah, let's see the return of some of our wildlife if we can. It will be a delight. It will be wonderful. Right, my lovelies, notes flying everywhere. I'm going to leave it there. I will see you all again soon. I need to go and stir my pot. I think it's been about half an hour. I had it on really low. So I'm going to go and sort my food out. I'll see you again really soon. Not sure quite what for, but I'll see you all really soon in any case. In the meantime, happy reading, happy thought-provoking reading. Yeah, I love this time of year for the indulgence of late night cozy time with a book. It's my happy place. See you all soon. Cheerio.